morning, everybody, and welcome to everyone. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Dawn Lane, and I am the Program Development and Implementation Manager for the Massy Learning Institute. In our leadership series today, our presentation will look at keeping teams engaged and committed while leading in times of disruption. So, how often have we heard the word disruption recently? Even before the disruption caused by the COVID pandemic, our businesses faced disruptions such as varied projects, changing systems within our organization, new technology, and what that brings with it, the industry changes, and the fluctuating global market trends. Can you imagine the dance our leaders perform daily to keep adapting while ensuring that our teams remain agile, and doing this while understanding that as their leader, they're dealing with the varying skill sets, problems, and fears of each individual on their teams. And still, our leaders keep the businesses profitable. So, let me introduce our leader and presenter for today, Mr. Randy Graham. Randy is the CEO of Massy United Insurance Limited, which operates in 20 countries across the Caribbean. He has over 250 staff members under his span of care, and Randy knows them all on a first-name basis as he strives to ensure that staff are empowered and grow within the company. He was previously the Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Services Commission, or the FSC, in Barbados. He also served as the Director of Insurance and Pensions at the FSC. As CEO of FSC, Mr. Graham was responsible for much of the setup work for that organization, which is one of the first integrated regulatory bodies established to regulate and monitor the non-bank financial systems, which is inclusive of insurances, pensions, credit unions, and security sections. He is also a trained risk manager and lectures at the University of the West Indies, the Sagicor Cave Hill School of Business, the Insurance Institute, and the Credit Union League. He also served as a director of Invest Barbados and the Joint Policy Working Group as they built out the future of the international business sector in Barbados. Welcome, Randy. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So we have a topic today, as Dawn said, and I thanks Dawn for the introduction, and apologies for that, for the length of that. But I promise to shorten it next time, so we don't have to go through all of that. But certainly for this morning, we talking about something that's very close to me, and it's a topic that I take to heart. Keeping teams engaged in the first instance, committed in the second instance, and in times when we're talking about disruption. So I suppose, like Dawn said, there's a lot of times the terminology of employee engagement and disruption has been used in recent. So for the purposes of this presentation, just want to set a little bit of a context for how we use it in the discussion this morning. And that discussion this morning is we're really trying to bring a realism to and a reality and a practical applicability to the topic. So, I'll do a little bit of talking about experiences and structure, and then open up afterwards for hopefully a range of questions where we can get to answer, what your queries or questions or thoughts may be on the topic, or how companies have done it in the past, or how you would want to see it in the future, or where you would want to see some improvements, or you have your own ideas about how we could apply it. So in the context of the discussion for this morning, let's talk a little bit about the company first. So, many of us have gone through some form of training, discussions, business 101 or management 101. that says to us that companies are in business for increasing shareholder wealth. That's the basic management theory. In short, people set companies up in order to turn a profit. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just one of the goals of a company. So when we talk about the company, we talk about setting up a corporation or organism, entity. One of those purposes obviously is to generate profits for the persons who set the company up. A relatively fair point, I would say, for all companies. Companies, in a sense, also try to provide development opportunities for their staff. So the company will employ staff. We create an environment that allows staff to grow, to develop, to promote, to learn new things, to be exposed to different environments, to be exposed to different people, to have compensation, to have variability in the pay, to be able to access loans, mortgages, develop in sort of Maslow hierarchy of needs while you grow with the company. So that's another reason why we have companies in business, that we acknowledge that as a good reason. And then again, companies are there to improve the communities in which you operate. Massy is always been big as a conglomerate on saying that we want to improve the communities where we operate. So that's where you see companies giving back socially, companies supporting schools, companies supporting communities, companies giving in times of need, like recently with the unfortunate volcano in St. Vincent. Companies were giving back to help the community through that difficult period. Even now with the COVID, you see companies using corporate funds to aid and assist and pay for vaccinations and so on. So companies are there also to improve communities. So we set these companies up to make profits, to help the development of the staff, to improve the communities in which we operate. Then we put the leadership and management into the company, and we say to them, these are what we want you to achieve. So recruit your staff and get on with the work of achieving these objectives. Now, how do the leaders or the management go about this? Initially, we will plan and formulate business strategies. So management leadership will do SWOT analysis. They will look at the environment. They will come up with a strategy for how the company could operate, how it could be profitable, how it could grow, how it could expand. The areas that we go into, the type of products that we sell. We look at what in the environment could impact on that negatively and positively, what opportunities there are, and we set a strategy down that says, in order to achieve these three things as a company, this is the strategy that we're going to formulate. And then we come up with these performance indicators, right? So we say as a company, we want to hit X profit target. We want to hit X target in terms of expense control, or in terms of gross profit. We want to hit this target in terms of efficiency. We want to hit this target in terms of the sales, the level of sales that we achieve, no matter what it is we're selling, whether that's food, whether that's cars, whether that's insurance. We're trying to hit a particular indicator. We're trying to hit the customer service indicator. So we set ourselves that we want a minimum amount of customer complaints, or we want to be able to respond to that complaint within X time. And then we set ourselves goals for staff. We want a certain amount of hours of training achieved in a particular period for staff. We have these key performance indicators that we establish after we establish our strategy, so everybody understands where the company is going along, right? Then we engage the staff. You have fabulous HR departments that engage the management, get the management to engage the staff, get the staff understanding. You have communication, get the staff in a place of understanding why the company is here, what the company's strategy is, what those indicators are, what the expectation of the company for the staff is through performance appraisals, and then we establish what the staff expect of the company through 360 approaches, and we get the feedback in surveys, and we engage the staff as a formulation of this particular strategy. So we create the cycle where we do annual planning, we monitor the performance, we review that performance on an annual basis to make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of ownership, leadership, management, staff, about what the company is trying to achieve on an annual basis. And then we reward. We reward staff with compensation. We reward staff with variable pay for performance. We reward the management in the same way. And if everything works in that cycle, then the shareholders get the reward with the dividend. So we set up this annual structure. Staff, understand it. It's a cyclical structure. We have budget periods. We have performance review periods. We have achievement periods. We have end of year periods where persons, we go through audits and then we declare results, and it becomes a performance management cycle that everyone in the company at some point hopefully understands is part of the cycle, gets accustomed to that cycle. There will be times where we have in the year Christmas programs or end of year programs for staff. We get all those awards and so on going on, and it's just a cycle of the company trying to achieve the objectives that is set out to. We get, persons are communicated to that. We all get in the frame of mind. We come to work. We understand this, and this is how the company runs in context. Then we disrupt it. We build a company. We get it into a cycle. We get the staff into a cycle that they understand. We get everybody, customers, into an expectation of when they come into the company, they know what to expect. They know where to find things. They know what the cost will be. They know who to talk to when there's a problem. We have this settling of the strategy, and then we disrupt it and break the whole thing up for various reasons. So what causes this disruption can be different approaches. So there's disruption that we create on our own, and I say we as a company create on our own. There's disruption that we do not control, such as natural disasters, and then there's disruption that the industry in which we operate causes. So we are fine, again, in the context of a company where we are understanding our budget, understanding our target, hitting our straps, getting to the back end of the year, declaring results. We are, training the staff, we're paying the staff, we're giving bonus and increments on a cycle, and then up comes a COVID, and the way that we have done it for the last 3 years completely disrupted. We can't do it in that way anymore. Or up comes online shopping. And the way we buy cars, the way we bought food, the way we sold cars, the way we sold food, with people walking into a physical plant, touch and feel and checking out, our salespersons out there talking to them. We disrupt that now with our online sales environment. Or we're going along and we get supply, we turn it around into sales, and then the supply chain is disrupted because a tanker in a stream blocks up and we can't get the supply anymore. For whatever the reasons, or in our case, our technology has been working for us as a company. We are doing okay. We're selling. We're earning, and then we want to expand, and the technology base that we're on anymore cannot sustain that expansion. So we have to now implement a new form of IT system. So we're going through an IT transformation. Whatever the disruption is, I think what we have to understand as leaders, as management, as staff within the company, is that we have a company and we have staff in that company who have grown accustomed to a way of doing their job. They've grown accustomed to a cycle of how the company operates. When you disrupt that, you throw everyone out of sync in what they have come accustomed to, and it becomes a huge change management issue more than anything else for the people who are in it. And in order to continue to achieve the tenets that we are trying to achieve as a company, both from a performance standpoint and from an employee engagement standpoint, it changes. The normal way of your cycle, budgeting, your performance, your review, all of that changes when you're in disruption. And the first thing the leaders have to understand is they have to understand and respect that change, and that people have been disrupted, and that although they are still with us, they are in a different frame of mind. And you put yourself in that in your own personal frame of mind, as though, remember when you were using Windows XP, for example, and you know, you were using Excel. You could find everything in Excel. You know where the cells were. You know where the formula was. There's a graph that you like. You could find it, and you do all your work in Excel very comfortable, like clockwork, right? And then, here comes Microsoft and brings out another form, of Windows, and they change the Excel version. And where your nice graph was anymore, you can't find it because it's not there anymore. It's in a different place. Or who you used to type in your formula, that has no change. You can't find anything. Imagine, put yourself in that frame of mind and the frustration that you get now in trying to use Excel. It's the same Excel that you used before to do all of your projects. But because they now changed your version, disrupted your flow, you get frustrated. It's like, I want to go back and use the old XP version. I don't want to use this new version because I can't find anything. Right? And the frustration builds. Remember when that frustration built for you, who did you shout at? You shout at Microsoft and say, why did you go and change the version? I mean, why did she keep it where I could find everything? And that frustration, that anger built up. Same thing for example, again, if you put yourself in the frame of mind of a online banking. So you have your online banking, you have your password, you log in, you can find your stuff, you can move everything around, and you're doing okay. And then they change the platform, and they send you a nice email saying there's a new platform. You go on, the login screen is different. You can't figure out where to go to log in. And once they get in, things are all over the place. You can't do your transactions the way you used to do them because it's new, it's changed. Your frame of mind now is, I don't want to use this anymore. I want to call somebody and complain about it because I can't get it used in the way I used it before. It's the same bank, it's the same funds, but the disruption now puts you in the form of that frustration. That's the exact thing that happens in our companies when our companies have to go through a disruption. No matter what the disruption is, it's a change. It creates frustration because people cannot do their jobs in the same way now as they did it in the past, and that in itself creates inherent frustration. And you have to accept that creates inherent frustration. The next thing you have to accept is that everybody deals with change differently. So you may have somebody who is fine, happy to get things changed, happy to learn new things, excited about the disruption because they want to learn about selling online, or they want to be able to understand the different supply chain. That there's an individual that loves that and lives for that and is very happy to operate in that disruption. And then there are individuals who absolutely hate it. They hate change. They don't want to learn anything new. They don't want to be frustrated or bothered with having to understand a new IT system. They just want to be able to serve the client, but they can't serve the client because this new system has all the information wrong, or it has the information in different place, or it takes longer to do it under this new system as under the old system. And the frustration builds, so they completely turned off from doing the normal job in the normal cycle because they have been disrupted. So the form of disruption or the reason behind the disruption, in a sense, is not really the biggest relevance. The biggest relevance is how it impacts your staff, how it impacts your employee base. And you as managers, you as leaders now have to understand that there is a need to react to that environment. Now you're reacting to the environment to engage staff, to get them through the disruption. But you also have to understand that you're reacting to the environment while keeping the employees engaged. You never stop trying to hit the tenets of the company. So you still have your performance, you still have you're building your employee, you still have your community to service, and you now are in a position where you have to manage all of these. So it's not business as usual. It's a form now of reacting to the disruption, but still finding new ways to achieve that. How do you do that as a management? How do you do that as a leader effectively? How do you keep the staff, moving along? In the first instance, you have to be very clear in your mind why the disruption was caused and what is the end result or the proposed end result of that disruption. So, if you look at a COVID disruption, it was caused by external environment. You understand that the staff is in a different place, and your question is, okay, where am I taking the company now in the COVID environment? Is it that we're in a holding pattern until COVID goes away? Or is it that we are transitioning the company into a new place, a new point B of what we have to achieve to live with COVID going forward? If it was an IT transformation, you're coming from a system that worked, but it will not work for you in the future. or it worked, but you cannot use it for the same efficiencies. And you're transforming into a new IT system that will give everybody, companies, customer, staff, much more efficient and effective, relationships on the IT in the future. But there's a period that the staff will be disrupted until they get to that, and you're trying to get the staff through that period of disruption. But the utopia at the back end of the transformation is a better world for everybody. So then it becomes a period of disruption that you're trying to carry people through until you get the back end of it. Or maybe it's a disruption from your competitors, and now it's a survival disruption. So now employees are worried about the future. You're worried about company performance. You're worried about whether you can survive the competition. And it's a disruption that says we have to improve to be able to stop the competitors from eating our food. So now the plan is we have to make these changes, or we have to go into new products, or we only sold cars before, but now we have to sell cars and tractors in order to survive this. So in your mind, you have to get very clear about what's causing disruption and where you're taking the company in the first instance. In the second instance, you have to communicate. The communication must increase. You have to set structured communication, whether that's sort of quarterly staff meetings, monthly management meetings, other forms of check-ins that they are structured where staff know when to expect the communication. Whether that's every 2 weeks, whether it's every month. There must be a very clear and well-structured communication plan. Now, the reason why you have to have that communication plan so very well structured, and this is outside of your normal communication, is that staff now in the disruption period need to be brought along at every step to calm the uncertainty down. So they need to understand what's causing the disruption. They need to understand that you are doing something about the disruption. They need to understand what the vision is for either the period or the end result, and they need to be taken through step by step as we go along. So that they're clear that they're moving forward, and that helps to calm the uncertainty during the disruption. So your communication plan becomes almost sacrosanct. You have to have that well structured. You have to have that in place. You have to put the effort around that communication structure in the first instance. You also have to keep and they say you as leaders, you as managers, you as supervisors, you as staff, have to also keep the pulse of the staff as you go along. And remember, I say that some people will be more agile to change, some people will be more resistant to change. On an individual basis, you have to be able to know which is which, and you have to cater your individual communication with persons now to satisfy what they are going through in terms of their mental disruption during the process. That's the only way you keep them engaged. One structured sentiment or communication will not satisfy all staff. So, and if you try that, what you end up with is some people who connect with that communication or remain engaged, others fade away because they don't connect with that type of communication. If you want to do it well, you have to be able to respond to the various elements of where the staff are on their individual basis, and you have to be able to link, communicate, and respond to those on an individual basis. And that doesn't have to be on a structured period, but you have to feel the pulse of the staff and know when to communicate. The other thing is that as a management, as a leadership, particularly as a leadership, you cannot pass off disruption period to anybody else. So you have to lead it. Somebody has to lead it, and you have to lead it. You can't say, well, I will delegate this down to somebody, or delegate it away, or use the environment or the COVID period as you blame and say, well, it's not us, it's not me, it's somebody external. We have to wait and see what's going on. That's not allowed. You have to put your hand up, and it says, I know it says sometimes it's a little bit of a scary situation, because as a leadership, you understand that if you get it wrong, you fail, but that's the role. You have to lead it. You can't pass it off. I mean, it's a difficult period of the company. It's not a normal cycle of the company, but you have to be out front and center with it, which means that at some points you have to have your sleeves rolled up. You have to be down in the trenches. So if it's an IT transformation, for example, you have to know the new system. You have to know the old source system. You have to be able to go in and work with it, feel the frustration and the problems that the staff are going through, if you're going to be able to respond to it. If it's a disruption like COVID, again, you have to be down on the floor. You have to understand what they're seeing with people coming in, with people going out, when you make your decisions, you need the on the ground understanding of what's going on to make better decisions. So you have to be in the trenches, leading by example. But as a leader, you also at some point need to know when to pull back on the balcony and focus on the overall objectives. So there's a point where you have to pull back and look at the strategy. Yeah, there's a point where you have to pull back and look at your targets. There's a point where you have to pull back and do the budget. Those things don't go away, but there's an added responsibility during period of disruptions where you have to take on both. So you can't stay in the trenches and only lead the disruption, because then you won't ever keep the company moving in terms of where it needs to get to in its vision and in its targets. So there's a period where you have to be down, and then there's a period where you have to be back up on the balcony, making sure that you're hitting the overall targets that the company needs to hit. And you have to be open with that in your communication to the staff, because the staff needs to understand that, I'm here today, I'm helping, I'm in it. And if you don't see me tomorrow, it's not because I'm tired of it and I've walked away from the disruption, but there is a period where I need to go and figure out our budget for next year to make sure that we have it. There's a period where we need to go and step back and make sure that our profitability for this quarter is where it needs to be. And if it is not, that I'm making the right decisions to change that, because at the end of the year, I still want to be able to hit the target so I can give the staff the bonus at the end of the year, the increment and so on. So you need to be able to communicate to the staff, I am here with you. But if there's a period where you don't see me, it's not because I've gone away from the disruption. It is that there are elements that I have to keep going, but I will be back to lead this particular process and get the feedback from the staff as to what they need during the process. And then I think, probably the last thing I would say, because I do want to open up for the questions, is that you have to be able to sort of detail, document, project if you want to, the vision of what the company will be or where the company will be after the disruption is ended. So there is a period of disruption. It's difficult, but at the end, as a staff member, you will have an easier time selling because the technology will be better. Or, as a company, we will keep our staff safe from COVID infections by the protocols that we are putting in place if you just work with us through that particular process. Or at the end, we will be competitive and we will maintain our market share, because you need not worry about your about particular instances of us now selling on our food online versus everybody walking into the supermarket, because that's what we need to do to make sure that our market share is preserved. So at the back end of this disruption and the change is done, we will still maintain our company, we will still maintain our market share, we will still be there to supply our customers. You need not worry about the future of the company. And so you have to create that vision, and as you bring the whole company staff and put it along with that during the disruption, and in everything you do, it is paramount, sacrosanct, if you want, that you be open and transparent in your communication. Our employees, our management teams, they're all extremely smart, well-educated folks. They don't try to in any way not give them the full 100% of what the reality is. If you start to withhold, or if you start to give parts of the information and not the full information, that only adds to the speculation, right? So in your messaging and in your communication, particularly during times of disruption, where people are not in the same frame of mind that they would be during the normal cycle, you have to be very transparent in your communication. Now, of course, as a manager, it means that there are things of your own health and wellness that during the period, it puts a lot of stress on you, on a person. So you have to pay even more attention to your health and your wellness, your exercising regimes, or whatever it is you have going on, because you need to have that energy, that drive to continue. You can't fade away during the disruption. You always have to be upfront, and those things you have to contemplate. But if you can, in my view, if you can get to the part where you're articulating the vision, you're pulling the team around the communication during the disruption, you've set a box around the disruptive period, showing the cause, what we're doing about it, and where we'll be at the end, and when we will get to the end, then although it's a very stressful period, and although it's a period that is not normalized in terms of its cycle, it is a period that you can get the company through, get the staff through, and still hit your normal indicators of profitability, staff development, and community improvement while you're going through the disruption. But it is a period that there's just additional stress and additional requirements for other things during the period, but it is possible. It's not something that we are yet in a position where we have a lot of training for theory behind it. So we are learning as we go along, but it is clear that these are the tenets that you have to follow to get your company through disruptive periods, and these are the type of things that we want to encourage both leaders, managers, as well as staff to be patched into as all of us go through these disruptive periods. So I think at that point, this is a good point for me to sort of start my story, and then we open up to the MLI team to carry us through any questions or queries persons may have.
Fantastic. Randy, thank you for giving us that visual. And I'm now going to hand you over to Renee Barnett, who will be moderating our Q&A segment. Renee?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much, Dawn. Thank you so much, Mr. Green. So our first question this morning is from an anonymous person. What do you do if you try to keep your employees engaged and informed and seek feedback in an effort to make sure their needs are being met, but then they seem disinterested or generally don't give any feedback at all?
You don't stop trying. You can't stop trying. You have to be, in the sense, that's the time where you have to try even harder. So there is a sentiment that sometimes persons may be disruptive, if you want to call that, in their communications, in their what I guess people may refer to as grapevine conversations and so on during the period. And you say there's a school of thought that says, leave that on the fence and focus on those who want to be positive, who wants to be involved, and so on, right? I don't see that during the times of disruption. And what I see during times of disruptions, if people are still not engaged, you have to find out whether they are disinterested or whether the period has them so tired, brain tired, if they're so that they can't manage to take on anything more, that they're being quiet. Or is it that they've given feedback, they didn't think that they were heard, nothing seemed to have changed, and therefore they now pull back as being even more disinterested. I think when you get to that point, you have to try even harder to connect. You have to try even harder, different ways, new ways to communicate. Because, and I say that because the basic premise again of getting companies through very difficult and disruptive period is the basis of communication. So I don't think it is a period where you can allow the communication to go away. It's a period, if anything, that you have to increase your communication. So in instances where staff, seemingly are become even more disenfranchised during the period and quiet, that's when I get even more pedantic on the communication and say to them, we need to talk in some form. If we don't want to talk face to face, let's use the Menti. Let's have little conversations, one-on-one, one-on-two, whatever the case may be. But I don't think that is the period to sort of reduce or pull back on the communication, or to leave alone and say, well, if they wanted something, they would have said. Because in many instances, you find that's not the case.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question. What skill sets do you need as a leader to lead in disruption?
Yeah, boy, I mean, we use this term of emotional intelligence in quite frequently, and I suppose in different ways. I would suggest that in the most extreme times of disruption, leaders have to have a very connected sense of what they call emotional intelligence in theory. That is to say that your perception of individuals and where their frame of mind is, your perception of the temperature within a company, whether the frustration or the stress is increasing, or whether it's low, or whether it's decreasing, your perception of when there needs to be a communication, or when there needs to be a period of quiet where you pull back and don't communicate, your perception of whether the disruption is clouding the normal operations of the company. And so there's the right amount of focus on output in the company is not there because the company is completely distracted by the disruption. Your perception of those have to be heightened. It have to be at the highest point of being able to perceive and know when to communicate and when not to communicate. It is absolutely critical to getting companies through that period of disruption. So yeah, people have to have technical ability. I get that. People must be able to be quantitative. People must be able to be articulate and so on a normal basis to be able to lead. But I think that when you are trying to get a company through a period of disruption, your sense of perception and connections to the verbal and non-verbal cues within a company, both from the staff standpoint and from the overall direction and performance of the company standpoint, have to be extremely high. Yeah, and I would think that certainly that is one of the most critical skills that you have to sharpen and portray as you get a company through a difficult period of disruption.
Okay, thank you so much. So our next question is coming from Tricia. Any tips on how to keep yourself motivated while working through keeping your employees motivated?
Yeah, I got one or two. I mean, first thing is I think, and I believe in this a lot, right? You have to have clarity of thought. So I'm not the smartest cookie around, so I like to keep things simple. But you certainly have to be very clear in what you're trying to achieve first and foremost. So if it is that goal that you're setting for yourself is to be successful in the period of disruption, that is to get a successful implementation of a new IT system, or to make sure that you have zero staff positive cases of COVID during the disruption, or to convert your selling structure from physical walk-in structure to online structure by December 1 in any particular year. You have to be very clear in your mind as to what your goal is, and you have to be very clear in your mind as to what you're working towards to achieve. And keeping it simple allows for flexibility along the path. When you start to overthink things and you're trying to hit 17 targets as opposed to 3, because you're thinking, oh, I have to get this IT conversion done, but I also have to make sure that the customer service levels don't fall here, and I have to make sure that that I don't have any resignations from staff, and I have to make sure that we increase the sales by 7% through to March, and I have to ensure that we get the new vehicles negotiated with Toyota, so that contract is done, and I have to be sure. So when you start to add this complexity in during periods of disruption, it becomes a real challenge for yourself to maintain the motivation, because although you have achieved 3 of those goals within a period, you think that there's 6 of them that you haven't achieved within a period, and then you get deflated because you feel I'm failing on 6 where I'm only gaining on 3. And there has to be an acceptance that when companies are in disruptive periods, you cannot achieve all that you would want to achieve, because focus has to be placed on a temporary issue, and your energies have to be placed in different places. So you have to accept that you cannot achieve at the same level, and you have to then prioritize what it is that you're trying to achieve and measure on that basis. And I think that first thing is setting those what I would call simplistic individual goals for achievement that keeps you motivated. So if you set them, you hit them, it keeps you going to hit more. You set too many, you don't hit them, you get flattened and you get disheartened and disrupted and so on. I mean, so the first instance is that goal setting. I mean, the second instance, and again, I think this is very important. You have to have a safe place is not the right term for it, but you have to have a balance in your own sort of personal well-being. So you accept that as a leader, manager, an employee in a difficult disruption period, you need to be engaged in a difficult exercise for a particular period, maybe 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day, maybe 10 hours a day, depending on the demands of the job, and you accept that. But then you have to give yourself a period where you step away from that and refresh, right? And I'm not talking about vacation or anything. I'm talking about in the day, right? So if you're going hard, trying to get to the back end of a problem with the IT transformation for 10 hours, there must be a place where you accept that there's diminishing returns, and you cannot keep going for 14 hours or 16 hours because you will get no more benefit. You have to pull away from that. And when you pull away from that, you have to know where to go to your place of calm, or your place of happy, or your place of refresh, whether that is gardening, whether that's running, whether that's exercising, whether that's cooking, whether that's running around with your children, whether that's taking a line with dominoes or a bar or something. I mean, whatever it is that is your particular place, be always clear that there is a need to step back, and that is more beneficial than you think. If you keep going, you do actually burn out and get diminishing returns. Stepping away from a problem gives you, again, it gets back to this clarity of mind, clarity of thinking. Your brain works sometimes when you're sleeping, when you're away from things. You don't have to be at it all the time for your brain to be working. You're processing information when you sleep. Sometimes you wake up with the idea, you go running. By the time you take your shoes off, you found the solution. You have to accept that is a part of keeping yourself motivated and refreshed during a period of disruption. So you have your goals. You have your step away or sort of recover point, and I think you also have to be able to have the right say support system. I would call that, but people who are both in the company or maybe outside the company, could be family, could be friends, could be somebody at another company going through a similar type issue. But there must be a support system that keeps you motivated, almost as like gym membership. So some people can exercise at home, some people can't exercise at home because they need to see the gym instructor. They need to have their friends around. People need to scream at them and push them to keep going so they don't stop. Whatever that support system is for you in leading through the disruption, you need that support system to keep pushing you. So you have the clarity of thought, you have your time to step away and refresh, and then you also need that support system to keep pushing you. And you get those three things together, oftentimes you can remain motivated through a difficult period.
Thank you so much for that detailed response. Okay, on to our next question, also from an anonymous person. I am from a team that had members who were once engaged, vibrant, and always giving feedback. Since recently, those same team members have taken a seat in the back and have become very quiet and now give very little feedback. Can this be attributed to the type of leadership being experienced, or are the team members just plain tired?
Well, I don't know the specifics, but what I would say is that it could be both actually. I give examples, right? So, as a company, as a let's say a teaching community, as a learning community, we have now gone to the point where we're saying to our students or university grads or persons working in companies, we want you to be engaged. We want you to be part of the company. We want to get your ideas because they are important. We want to get your input because your input will help us to drive the future of the company. We want to create a company environment based on what you're telling us you are important to us. Also, your ideas are good ideas that we want to hear, we want to implement, right? And we are creating positions where we are training these persons to think that way, and they all bought into it. They come out, they said, yeah, I want to be a part of this company. I want to lead. I want to influence the direction, the future direction the company is taking, and so on. And they start out very aggressively giving input, giving feedback. They're going home and thinking about it. They're coming back and telling the the persons, the management, and so on, about things that we could consider and things we can't consider. Now, great to engage folks, great to get their feedback. But if the feedback goes into a place, into a manager that does not act on it, does not process it, and act on it doesn't mean that they have to accept every recommendation that a staff member gives. But they have to act on it in the sense that if it's a good idea, you give the feedback to say it's a good idea. If it is an idea that may be good but hard to implement, you have to give them that feedback. But that's a good idea, but it's not. It's challenging to implement because we will need X, Y, and Z resources that we don't have. Or if the feedback that if the idea doesn't fly, then you have to say, well, I don't think that will work. Great, thanks that you're thinking about it and giving the idea, but I don't think it will work. The feedback cycle is critical, and the ability for a manager to hear those recommendations from staff and take on responsibility to do something about it, whether that's to accept the conditions or to explain why we can't accept, is what will keep the staff member going. If you create an environment as a leadership, as a management within a department or within an organization where the feedback is not listened to, is not heard, is not acted on, no response is given, and so on, then eventually what happens is the enthusiasm just tanks, right? Because then they say, well, what's the point? I keep giving the feedback, nobody listens to me, or they don't hear me, or I said that and nothing changed, right? And as I said, it's not because that they said it has to change. There may be good reasons why it does, but it can't change in the way that they've recommended. But they have to get that feedback in a very direct way. If not, the enthusiasm goes down, and then those persons that wants come up with the ideas, good or bad, the thought processes, they don't bother anymore because they say, what's the point, right? So that's where you get the situation where management, leadership, structure within an organization, bureaucratic or otherwise, causes these employees who were once so keen on giving ideas to reduce that enthusiasm. That's one instance. So that could very well be a possibility. But then it could be, people just get tired from life, right? So I've been working at this company for 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. I've given a lot, given maybe all that I can give in this particular company. I'm now at a place where I have to decide, am I comfortable here? Do I keep going? Is it that I'm just comfortable to be where I am, and I don't want the change. I don't need any other change. I'm comfortable with that. Or is it that I have to reflect and determine, do I stay here or do I move on? Am I disgruntled? Am I seeking a new opportunity? And they have to make their own personal choices about that. During that period, employees, doing their own internal reflection, very well might have lost the enthusiasm to contribute because they're dealing with their own personal review and their own personal needs. And again, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You're going to deal with yourself first before you're engaged to keep giving the feedback, and we have to respect that staff get to that point. That's why some persons will tell you sometimes we worry about turnover in the company because nobody wants his staff turnover. But for the staff member, sometimes that turnover is needed to refresh. You need a new company, you need a new environment to be able to refresh and come back again. And that is an individual case. My experience, unfortunately, you probably end up with staff who are enthusiastic with giving comments, but not getting the feedback or not seeing the change, and then reverting to being quiet. That's probably more often the case than staff reflecting and wondering whether this is the right path for them. But both of them could be scenarios which cause once very enthusiastic feedback employees to become less enthusiastic in giving feedback.
On to our next question from an anonymous person again. If there is a lack of trust with your team and many perceptions are being created among the team, how can this be changed when you tried communicating many times?
Yeah, that's, trust is a difficult one. Unfortunately, the first part of this answer won't help much, but that's why I always say it's very big not to lose the trust in the first instance, right? As a team leading, as a leader, as a manager, whether it's disruption or otherwise, I mean, it's very important to maintain the trust, which is what gets back to being very open and transparent in the communication in the first instance, good, bad, or ugly. It is a means that you have to give communication a lot of thoughts, because oftentimes, it's not so much what you say or how you say it, is how people feel about that communication that stays with them. And you have to think through that and be very clear in that before you start the interaction, the communication, because once you break the trust, it's a difficult process to get it back. If you really want to get it back and want to put the effort into getting it back, there are a couple of steps. And in the first instance, you have to be open and acknowledge that actions, either your own personal actions in the environment, or circumstances that have occurred, have impacted on the trust, right? So you have to be upfront with that communication, say to the team, look, trust is an issue. Trust is the issue because X, Y, and Z have happened in the past. I understand why people now would not be as trusting, but I put it to you and put it on the line that if we are to go forward successfully as a team, as a company, we have to rebuild this trust. And I am, you have to be willing to listen and acknowledge and do what the other members of the team think is possible to earn and rebuild that trust. So it's not, I'm by no means a organizational behavior psychologist or otherwise, but what I know is that building trust takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of openness. Rebuilding trust in particular takes a lot of openness. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of uncomfortable conversations to be able to rebuild that trust. Is it possible? Yeah, I think it is possible. As I said, if we acknowledge that the trust has been broken, the why, acknowledge that we all want to rebuild the trust in the team because there's a benefit to everybody on the team if the trust is rebuilt, and acknowledge how we're going to get back to that point of working jointly to rebuild the trust. But it is not a short-circuited process that you just have a meeting and trust comes back. It will take time of saying what you're going to do, doing it, showing evidence of the doing, not of the saying. You have to show evidence of the doing, and over time you rebuild the trust. But it is a bit of a process to rebuild trust.
Our next question, what would you say might be some strategies for HR to support employees during times of disruption?
Yeah, again, I would give my view, right? I mean, there's same Renee and Dawn and another HR specialist on the call. I sure can give a much better articulated response than I. But certainly, HR is in a very unique place because HR has a lot of sort of information about the company and about staff members in the company that people want to share, but also that needs to be kept confidential, right? Because of the nature of the information passing through HR, it comes with an inherent trust. It comes with an inherent expectation of control of that information, and it comes with an inherent expectation of the staff member that what I put into HR remains in a particular kept in a particular manner and not used in other manners, right? So I would say that during times of disruption, if you contemplate our early discussions where we're saying that people are even more stressed, if people are even more mentally fatigued during the period of disruption, then you get the want, the need, of HR being more, say, emotional and psychological in nature and helping persons during that, which means that they have to go into a place of almost a place of the vulnerable for individuals to get them through that particular process. So oftentimes that means for HR, very much being upfront and clear on confidentiality in people coming to them on issues during disruption. It means oftentimes creating solutions for employees that involve independence. So whether that's an independent EAP or an independent person coming in to assist because we're trying to control and we're trying to get through a particular period where people are not worried in the future then of what people that they continue to work with know. It's a recommendation, a point of using people who are objective in their view, So again, that external third party independence objectivity comes in to say, I'm feeling disrupted, I'm feeling fatigued, I want to blame my manager, and I want to blame the company for putting me here. Oftentimes, that's not where you want the manager or you want the company to be defending, because then it gets over you just saying that because it's you the management and you're the company. Oftentimes for HR, it's beneficial to have an independent, objective person reviewing it so they can say objectively, not that it's fault, but what's the causes relating to these circumstances. So my sort of soft recommendation from the HR front, particularly during times of disruption, is to be very cautious and clear in the confidentiality practices around helping persons through that period, but then the use of competent, qualified third party consultants and individuals to assist during that period, simply because in disruption you get very much sometimes a you versus me type environment. Just like when we were talking about the new versions of Excel, it became me versus Microsoft. So I don't want to hear from Microsoft. I want to hear, anything that Microsoft tells me about their new Excel. I'm sure they're going to say the new one is better than the old one. I don't want to hear that. I can find something in the old one. I can't find it in the new one. I need an objective voice to tell me if it's if I'm being unreasonable and blaming Microsoft or not. And oftentimes I think HR, does a very good job in maintaining the confidentiality, but also in using third parties who are objective in the process to get us through the disruption.
All right, thank you so much. We are almost out of time, but I'll just ask one last question before we hand back over to Dawn. What do you do if your supervisor is not supportive and understanding in these times?
Call them out. Yeah, not in an aggressive way. But I think there needs to be full transparency in a 360 particularly during the disruptive times. I mean, it's not. I don't think there's a problem for any staff member saying to a supervisor, look, I mean, this is a difficult period. This is the period of change. We are not just battling the normal running the mill competitive issues or efficiency issues or customer complaint. We are battling that along with the fact that I can't move around because of COVID restrictions. I can't, I have to stay home because I don't have anyone to keep my daughter, and there's online school. There are circumstances where I've had to be here last night till 10 o'clock, and I simply can't get home, turn around, and get back here for 8 o'clock the next morning. I need some consideration. So I'm not asking you to be overly supportive to, or blame to me for a particular circumstance. I'm just saying that in the context of it, I really do need you as my supervisors to support me in the context of this is an extremely disruptive period, and there's more expected of you. And supervisors, managers, and leaders need to also accept that during periods of disruption, there's more expected of us to get the company through it. And so there's a way to have that conversation in a very calm, open, and transparent manner that says, can I get a little bit of extra support during this period? And the supervisor to take it back seriously to see if I could do more, or if the company could do more under the circumstances, given the period, then we can. And if we can't, we have a very calm discussion about why I can or cannot, or I accept that I have not been as connected to you as I needed to be, because I myself have been distracted trying to get through my responsibilities of the disruption, and maybe not paying as much attention as I should have to your needs, which is also part of my duty. So I think an open communication, understanding that is beneficial.
That was fantastic. Randy, thank you again, not just for the presentation, but for the time you took to delve into those questions and to give those answers to our audience. Renee, as always, thank you so much for moderating the session. And to our audience, thank you for being here. We've come to the end of another MLI webinar. I hope to see you again at our next Level Up. Remember to look out for the flyers and for the flyers announcing our other workshop and paid programs. So until next time, remember to level up. Bye-bye for now. Have a fantastic day.